All right, Twitch, can you hear me now? There you go. Okay, thanks, Robert. Thanks for telling me that. And then in terms of sound, I'm sure you guys can hear the sound now. Yes, you can. I'm getting everything. Okay. So coming into turn one of the things that we need to be really worried about is getting all the way over to track left in order to open up the corner as best as possible. We've got a really good visual with the number boards over here on the left. In terms of braking zones and areas, we've also got the candy stripe curbing that can really set us up and suggest to us, hey, look, turn is coming up. We need to get ready for it. So where you brake in here, I call it a little bit of a brake zone. It will depend on your track state, your current state of your tires and your car, your comfort level, your whole range of things. But in general, we want to get on the brakes a little bit earlier maybe than we think. Don't brake as hard, brake a little lighter so we can maintain the weight balance of the car going through the corner. And then when we turn in, the car will be better than if we just stand it on the nose through threshold braking. So for me, I am braking between the 100 and the 50 board, about 75. If there was a point, you can see I'm just starting to tickle the brakes right here as I pass the 100 board. And then I get to braking at about the 75 board is where my max braking is. It's about 60%. So I am not slamming this brake by any means. I'm just doing it enough to, one, slow the car down, and two, get a little bit of weight on the front tires so they will help me turn in a little better. When we turn in for turn one, it's going to be at about the end of the candy stripe board is when the car is finally going to start to leave the curbing. We're turning our hands earlier than that. So we're turning our hands a little bit before the 50 board. But by the time the car and the suspension does its movements and physics takes over, the car is not turning until towards the end of the candy stripe board or candy stripe curbing. Notice that have a little bit of brake on the way down to apex, but not much. I've pretty much almost completely come out of the brake pedal here. And then the first part of the corner is actually a lot of coasting. So I'm trying to let the car take a set, give me all of its traction and cornering ability. And then when I know that car has basically taken that set and done its initial rotation on the early part of the corner, I start feeding on the throttle. And the goal is to try to get some throttle in the car before we get to the apex. So you can see right now at this point, I'm totally off the brake. I've started adding throttle. And then you can see pretty much at apex here, I'm almost at full throttle. The goal is to basically be at full throttle when we cross over the apex point. Our apex point is conveniently right with this orange curbing. So right where the orange curbing meets the candy stripe curbing, we want to put our right side tires kissing that orange curbing. We don't want to go over the orange curbing because the car will bounce up in the air pretty significantly and it's possible to take damage as a result. But we want to get right up on it as close as we can. If we do it right, the car is not going to bounce too terribly much. On this particular lap, you can see I took a little bit more than I wanted to. You can see how the car has already started to jump up as a result, and then it has to land on the backside. You can get away with a touch of it. Any more than that, and you may go for a ride, and we don't want to do that. If we do it right, our car will end up all the way out here on the exit curbing. And the exit curbing is significantly wide here. So long as our car is on the blue and white curbing, we will not get a 1X. If we go beyond the blue and white curbing very much, we will get a 1X. So the rule of thumb is keep your car on the blue and white curbing, and that stands for when the blue and white curbing ends as well. We don't want to be driving over the green. We want to bring it back onto the blue and white curbing. That's kind of the path and trajectory of the car through turn one. So you can see I come all the way to the edge here. And then right here, I'm staying on the blue and white curbing as much as I can, keep my right side tire somewhere on it. And that's a perfectly fine track exit or turn exit for turn one. Where people tend to get in trouble with turn one is they tend to either go too fast into the corner, so they run wide on the exit and pick up a 1X. They tend to turn in too early for this corner, so they don't turn in here. They turn in, let's say, here, right? They turn in a little bit early for this corner, and basically they apex it too early, and they run out of room as a result. Or they miss the apex altogether, and they're over here on the track, and they leave a little bit of meat on the bone. All three of those scenarios will result in you running wide on exit. So look at what is happening if you're having trouble with turn one to self-diagnose yourself. If you say to yourself, I'm running wide, I keep getting a 1X on the exit, okay, we can figure out what's happening. Are you hitting the apex? If you're hitting the apex, then you move on to the next thing. Okay, if you're hitting the apex, are you going too fast? The car is unable to turn. You're just carrying too much speed through there. Look at other people's data, compare it to somebody else in the PCA Sim VRS team, and you can see what everybody's apex or speed values, and that can tell you really quickly if you're going too fast or not. But self coach yourself on that front by looking at it. As a reference point, it looks like my min speed is 102, and on this particular lap. So could you go a little faster? Maybe go 103. You probably can't go 107 or 110 through here and keep it on the track. So just keep that in mind when you're practicing on it. When you come out of turn one, thing of note to remember is this line right here is the blend line, and then the track narrows pretty significantly at the end of the blend line. So think of like the exit at Spa, for instance. You can go over the blend line if you're on the track, so long as there's not a car coming out of pit lane. If there is a car coming out of pit lane, they have the right of way right of the blend line. They can't cross it onto the track, which is left of the blend line. You can't cross over and impede them right of the blend line if they're coming out. So keep that in mind, that if there's a car somewhere over here on the right side of the track coming out of pit lane, they don't have to yield to you, and you shouldn't be over there anyway. The only place that really can get into a bit of a hairy situation is if two cars are fighting coming out of turn one, and the one car gets a run on the other, and then they pop out to try to make a pass over here, and then there's a car up here trying to getting up to speed coming out of pit lane. That's where you can kind of get a little bit of hairiness if that happens. But just keep that in mind. The blend line and the track out point from pit lane is way down this little straightaway. All right, coming into turn two is our first of our hairpins. Really tight corner. I go down into first gear through here, and one of the nice things about Hockenheim is our much like Coda, our apexes are delineated by these nice orange or red sausage curbs, and so that's kind of where we want to put the car on the apexes of many of these corners. So if we're looking out for these sausages, that's where we want to try to be at for the apex. And this turn is exactly the same like turn one. So in terms of the brake zone, we're going to brake just before this service road that's over here. So I'm looking at the service road as my marker, and I'm braking just before it. So I'm braking right. I'm starting to touch the brakes right here. So again, about the 75 marker, or even with this orange barrier or in the break in the wall. But frankly, I can't see that from the cockpit of the car, so I'm not paying attention to that. I'm looking at the service road. We're going to brake in as straight a line as possible, and this is threshold braking. You can see my brake pedal is at 85%. I'm doing everything I can to slow this car, and probably tickling ABS a little bit, trying to get this car slowed down. So hard on the brakes, on the binders. We're going down all the way into first gear. The turn-in point always feels a little early for this corner. So, a typical really hard hairpin, we probably would want to go a little bit further out here and then turn in. But if you look at this corner, as we see it right now, there's a lot of camber. Well, not a lot, but there is some camber in this corner. And all the camber is down here on the inside of the corner. So we want to use that. And the only way to take really good advantage of it is actually try to get down to the corner and get down to the camber bit as soon as we can, so we can get as most advantage out of it. Also, if we go too far out and diamond this corner off and turn way over here, we're just extending the corner even longer than we normally would. So trail brake in, probably turn in around the 50 board, as you can see here. And then the goal is we have to wait. So very different than turn one. We're waiting to get this car rotated. It seems to take forever, but when it finally does, it's going to be somewhere around the apex point, which is conveniently this orange sausage. So right side tires right here at the orange sausage, that's our apex point. It is a late apex ultimately around this corner, and we want to try to get on throttle as soon as we can. However, we don't want to just slam the throttle. Anybody that's done any practice here will know, especially later on in a stint, when the tires start to really heat up and get a little greasy, it is very easy to overdrive the rear end of this car coming out of this corner and get a big power slide on the way out. That is scrubbing tires. That is costing you speed, because instead of going forward, you're going sideways. And that's also reducing the life of your tires in general. So we need to act as though we need to really focus on As we unwind our steering wheel, that's how we feed on the throttle. So a good thing to think about, the way I was taught, was pretend there's a string on the bottom of your steering wheel and it's tied to your throttle pedal. If you've got the steering wheel turned, the string is taut on the throttle pedal and pulling the throttle pedal up. As we unwind the steering wheel, we can push the throttle pedal as that string is allowing slack for you to push the throttle pedal. So as you unwind the wheel, your throttle pedal starts to go down, and it's not until your wheel is starting to get pretty much straight that you can be full throttle. Very similar type of, the same concept here. You can see I've got 108. I mean, my hands are end over end by looking at my steering wheel down here, right? And I'm not at full throttle. And then as I unwind the wheel, I start feeding on more and more throttle coming through the corner. If I go and slam on the throttle with the steering wheel at 180 degrees, the back end, the rear tires are just going to spin up. I'm going to enter traction control, and I'm not going to go anywhere. So keep that in mind in terms of trying to maintain your traction. The way we get a good run coming out of this corner is we, like I said, open our hands as we add throttle. But what that does is that reduces our ability to turn when we're adding throttle. Thankfully, this particular corner on exit is very wide. We have a lot of room on the outside, and so there's a lot of track that enables us to open our hands to add that throttle to start accelerating relatively quickly. There's no need to pinch this corner and keep the car all the way on track right to set up for the left-hander. In fact, if we're doing this correctly, we'll probably end up past mid-track, as you can see here, because the only way we can add that full throttle and actually start accelerating is to open our hands, which means that we're tracking out of that corner. Because this is a GT3R, we can take this next left-hander 100% flat from a relatively shallow angle because there's a lot of grip in the car in general, mechanical grip. So we'll use a little bit of the curbing on the inside. Just be aware that if you drop 2 tires on the inside of the curbing, the car will bounce a little. So just be ready for it, but it shouldn't be too upsetting. And then again, like the concept of turn 2, coming out of turn 3, we don't want to have too much steering angle. If we have too much steering angle, we're scrubbing our front tires, we're understeering through the corner, and we're not accelerating as fast because we have so much scrub. We want to open our hands while we have that full throttle, use all of the track, so we're encouraging the car to accelerate at its quickest ability as possible. And the only way it does that is with no steering angle. So we use all of the track on the way out, nice, easy hands. I'm over here on the right side of the track, not because I really want to be, it's because that's the only place that the car can go while maintaining a decent pace through here. So let me back that up and show what the whole sequence looks like again. So coming up into turn 2, brake just before the road, turn in at about the 50 board, going all the way down to first gear. Our apex point is the red sausage, off the brake, back on the throttle, opening our hands so we can add full throttle, and then once we're at full throttle, we hold that full throttle all the way through, keeping nice, quiet hands all the way through, and using every inch of the track to enable us to maintain that full throttle. Where is the track limit on the outside? Which outside, Mark? Do you mean on the outside of the final turn? The exit turn 13. It's basically when you get, if you were to get your right side tires in the grass, that's where you're going to pick up the 1X. So long as you keep your left side tires on this candy stripe, you're okay. So basically, don't touch the grass, and that's where you are. So this is fine. This is actually not a 1X whatsoever. This is considered on track. Great question. All right, any questions? Turns 1 through 3. All right. Motoring on, this is like the back straight at Coda. We're going into a really tight hairpin at the end of this straight. Basically hitting terminal velocity with the arrow. And my brake marker is, I feel like I'm braking at the curbing, but I can already tell I've already started tickling the brake at this point, so I'm braking a little earlier than I feel like I'm braking at. Use the 150 board as a really good barometer of, this is where I'm going to start braking, see what it feels like. Oh, I could have gone a little later, and start moving it around based on that. But in general, brake around the 150. Remember, you don't always have to go to the bleeding edge of brakes to get the most performance out of it. In fact, a car typically likes a little bit longer, lighter brake than a shorter brake zone, but you're staying in the car on the nose in ABS emergency braking. Braking a little bit earlier can sometimes keep a better balance in the car and actually result in you going faster. The reason we threshold brake and we brake as late as possible, because if we're racing somebody, they're going to do it and they're going to dive bomb you and they're going to be slow at the apex, but you can't drive through them. So racing's a different story if you've got cars around you, but if you're qualifying or you found yourself in a gap, sometimes braking a little earlier, a little lighter can be much more beneficial. So anyway, as I said, threshold braking, much like turn 2, we got to slow this car down from 160 miles an hour down to like, it feels like 5 miles an hour. The goal here is a little bit different than the turn 2, because this is a true hairpin. It's 180, almost 180 degree turn, whereas turn 2 is like 140 degrees. We are going to be going completely the other way around. So we need to do the traditional hairpin line of a little bit deeper, get the car rotated and diamond early so we can get on throttle and accelerate coming out, because it leads onto a relatively long straightaway for the track. So a little bit delayed turn in, not too much, but just enough. And we're maintaining that brake pressure all the way through to the apex point because we're keeping the weight. We're not braking and slowing the car down per se. That's not the reason we're staying on the brakes. The reason we are having about a 5 or 10% brake pedal here is because it's keeping the weight on the front tires, which is encouraging them to grip up and get the car to actually turn instead of understeer. As soon as we, and I pressed the wrong button, as soon as we get to the point where we're off the brakes and we start adding throttle coming through this corner, the car is going to take that weight off those front tires, and it's going to cause the car to start understeering. So we want to maintain a little bit of weight on those front tires to encourage them to keep turning. And as you can see here, I'm just messing with the brake pedal. So the firmer I press the brake, the harder the car bites a little bit. And then if I start to release the brake, it will end up taking a little bit of a wider arc. Ultimately, once we get past this point where we've apexed the corner, and it's almost like a true apex or maybe a little bit of a late apex, we do want to start adding on a little bit of throttle to try to get a good drive coming out of the corner. But be mindful, like I said, as soon as you go to throttle, there's two things that are going to happen. One, when you first go to throttle, you may actually spin up your rear tires a little bit, and you may actually get a little bit more rotation, which is a great thing, especially on a hairpin. Or two, if you're slow with the throttle, let's say, and you don't overcome the traction on the rear tires, the front end is just going to basically lift away from the ground, and the car's just going to understeer, and you're just going to end up going wider than you expected. So every time I come through the hairpin, I'm always feeling like I get the car completely rotated and pointed down the straightaway before I really start to hammer the throttle and go on. In terms of the track exit, you've got this yellow sausage here that you can get up on, but it is very bumpy. So if you've got any steering angle and you're jumping over this curbing, one, you may get into 1x when you go over the curbing, and two, you're going to bottom out on it, and the car is going to get really unstable. It's actually quite easy to, if you've got steering angle and you jump over this curbing with steering angle, to spin the car, because the car bottoms out and then it grips up when it lands, and then you just end up spinning a slow spin across the track, which is not good if you've got a bunch of people behind you trying to accelerate through this corner. So my advice is try to stay off this curbing. It doesn't really do you in that much benefit. Keep it nice and tidy. Don't go past the candy stripe, and don't even flirt with the curbing. When I'm at race pace, I actually tend to stay somewhere right around here instead, and don't even mess with this curbing. It'll be first gear coming through there as well. All right, we've got another straightaway. It has a turn 4 here, or turn 5. I don't know how the turns are numbered here, but this is flat out in this particular car, so it's of no concern. So this is all considered straightaway as far as I'm concerned. We do need to treat it like a corner, so we'll turn in at the normal turn-in point over here, and we'll apex it at the candy stripe curbing like normal. But it's 100% flat. The car has grip to give, so you can displace the apex a little bit and such. So it's possible to take it too wide, but just be aware that you are flat out through here. All right, coming up to this left-hander, we come through that kink, so to speak, and we move the car over to the right. It's very difficult to get the car all the way over to the right before we have to turn left, and frankly not really too necessary. We don't want to sacrifice the speed through the kink in order to try to set up this left-hander. So ultimately, we'll try to move the car over, but understand that we have to turn the car left. So it does not make any sense for the car to be pointed to the right side or at this concrete barrier when we're ultimately going to be turning left. So wherever you can get over here comfortably without jerking the steering wheel over there to get to the point, to the turn-in point, is fine. Ultimately, we want to have the car close to this candy stripe curbing over here at turn-in. And so our brake zone is going to be a little bit diagonal as we head to that point. I tend to brake about halfway down this first candy stripe is my marker. So right here. And we're going to go all the way down to second gear, get the car all the way over to the right side for the ultimate turn-in point. It's going to be turning in probably just after the 50 board right here, as you can see. I start to feed in my turn, and again, red sausage curbing, we want to apex it pretty much right at the middle of it. And the key here is momentum, momentum, momentum. We want to get off the brakes as soon as we can to carry as much speed as we can through the corner. I was trying multiple lines through here while I was practicing, and I was going down to first gear for a while and turning in a little bit later and pinching off the exit because ultimately we'll have to take a right-hander. But I was going slow as a result. So second gear prevented me from overslowing the car. Second gear was fantastic in terms of being able to get back to throttle without spinning up the rear tires and losing traction. It's just second gear for me felt fantastic. So I recommend trying that. When we come through here, the goal of that turn and this whole complex is to be over here on the left side of this, towards the left side of this curbing before it ends to set up for the fast right-hander, because that is what leads onto the straightaway. So ultimately, this corner right here, this left-hander, is the throwaway. It really doesn't matter that much how quickly you go through here. The only thing that matters is getting your car to a respectable place here to take this right-hander relatively quickly. And then this right-hander is not a brake turn-in. It is just a lift and then turn and then back on throttle. So coming through here, you can see I'm full throttle. I lift, and then I slowly start feeding back on the throttle. Apex point is right here at the green grass area. I try not to jump it too much because it does get very bumpy right here if you cut. But you can if you want to. I try to keep my right side tires only on the curbing without jumping it. On this particular lap, I did jump it a bit. And you can see the car bottom out and actually take a pretty aggressive hop, which is why I try to avoid it. So there you go, back on it. Try to avoid the bump, but I didn't there. And if we do it right, the car will end up under full throttle right here at the edge of the orange curbing on the exit. I have wrecked a car here by getting up on this curbing too much under full throttle with too much turn angle. So much like the hairpin before, as we were talking, you don't want to get up on this. You don't want to go over this with any kind of steering angle. If it looks like you are at this point and you are going to hit this sausage curbing with any kind of force, open your hands. Look where all the room is and all the run out is. You can open your hands and just run the car straight, take your 1X and bring it nice and safe. If you try to fight it and try to avoid it and you have steering angle when you go over this curbing, when the car bottoms out, it'll hook up when it lands on the other side and you will just J-hook into the wall over here. Ask me how I know, because I've done that in an endurance race, which was never fun. But let's say we don't do it. We get a good run coming through there. Everything's hunky-dory. We're setting up for the fast right-hander. The brake marker, unfortunately, we don't have a brake marker coming for this next corner. It's I look at a combination of a couple of things. I've got this concrete wall that ends up coming parallel to the track very close. That's my indication that I'm about to brake. And then where I'm actually looking is I'm looking over here at the apex point of this next right-hander. And I start to kind of brake as soon as I anticipate seeing the green painted surface through this corner. So if I go down to the cockpit, so I'm starting to hit the brakes right here. So I've crossed that point where the wall has come all the way to the track. It's a little bit of a heartbeat. And then what I'm anticipating is seeing the green paint. And right before I see the green paint, that is when I'm turning in to try to apex and try to get the car down there as best as possible. So there's the green paint that I'm talking about here on the inside of this curbing. I downshift to third gear. A lot of this corner for me is coasting on the entry. So I'm just letting the car do what it needs to do, maintain its speed through here, and get ultimately the front end turned in where I can take a lot of this curbing on the inside with my right side tires. and cut as much as I can and get back on throttle as much as I can, or as soon as I can, to keep the back end stable on the way through here. So you can see right here, I'm cutting a lot of the curbing. I'm already back at full throttle at this point. You may have to lift if you didn't cut enough, or this is a very, I call this corner, there's a lot of improvisation here. It depends on how well a turn in you get, where the car ends up at apex. It's really difficult to do this corner the same way every time. So you just need to be prepared that I may need to lift in certain places. I may not need to, just depending on how the car reacts through it. But ultimately, we want to apex with our right side tires on the green here in third gear, get back on throttle as soon as we can. And then we can use every inch of this green out here as track out, and you will not get a 1X. So this is not a 1X, believe it or not. And we don't want to obviously go so far as to get in the gravel, because that's bad news. But all of this is really grippy. All of this is like track surface. There is a bit of a bumpiness when you cross over the rumble strips or the curbs, but nothing the car can't handle under full throttle in nice quiet hands. All right, any questions to the middle sector before we get to the final sector?
Just a comment. There's a bump. If you don't take the curb on the right-hander before, there's still a bump in the surface. So you're going to get bumped here no matter what line you take. It's towards the end of the blue and green curb when you're on the main surface.
Okay.
You do get a bump right around there.
Okay. So there you go. So you'll have a bump if you stay on the surface. So why not just go ahead and take the bump through because when I go over the curbing, I don't feel that bump at all. So, but do yourself a favor. When I come through this corner, I always feel like I'm trying to apex my right side tires on the grass. I never can get there because of the way the corner is built. But I'm always trying. I feel like I'm trying to aim over here, but just the understeer in the car and the way the corner is built, I always end up pushing out a little bit on apex, and I end up around this area. So if you're finding yourself not able to get over to this green paint, think to yourself, okay, I'm going to get my right side tires as close to this grass as possible and really fight it. Try. Until you do get it, and then obviously go back the other way. But try practicing that. And the reason it's hard to get down there is because you don't see it because of the concrete wall until it's too late. And if you react to your vision being there, it's too late. You'll never get down to the grass effectively. So yeah, but I know you can see how planted my car is coming through that bump that was just mentioned. I'm not experiencing that bump whatsoever on my way through there. Go ahead.
Hey, Chris, you had a question about brake bias.
Oh, I did. Okay. So I did these laps completely stock, whatever the brake bias was in the car that came. Brake bias will be, if you're finding it difficult on turn entry to get the car to rotate, it's understeering a lot in the first part of the corner. Under braking, brake bias can help encourage the car to rotate early. If you are finding that you are getting too much, or you're getting understeer when you're on throttle, brake bias isn't going to do a whole lot about that. So brake bias can really only affect your braking, obviously your braking, and your turn-in point when you're trail braking into a corner. More rearward bias is going to encourage the car to rotate more. More front bias is going to encourage the car to be more stable on those entries. But for me personally, these laps that I didn't even touch the brake bias. In the GT3R, the Cayman, well, frankly, all the Porsches, the fuel tank is in the front of the car. So as the fuel burns off of this car, the weight is actually shifting more to a rearward bias kind of setup. So as the fuel burns off, the front end of the car and these cars is actually lifting slightly. You can counteract that with adding rear bias as you're going through your stint to maintain that similar feel of the car throughout the stint. So as the fuel burns off, the front end gets lighter, which means you have less grip just relatively than what you did with a full tank on the front end of the car. So we add more rear bias. That encourages a little bit more rotation to counteract that tendency for the car to understeer late in a stint. So hope that answers your question. Okay, good. Great questions and comments. Okay, coming into the little stadium section here. So we've got this really cool left-hander, lots of camber. It's like a little banked oval, which is really kind of neat. Which means we can carry a lot of speed at the apex. It's like a carousel. So we're basically what we're going to do is we're going to get our car to slow down to make the turn, but we're also going to carry our momentum around the inside of the curbing, the shortest distance around this corner. We're not apexing it at a single solitary point. That's why I say it's like a carousel. We're getting down to the curbing and we're following it all the way around the corner. So the good brake marker is we've got a nice delineated track surface coloration difference with the curbing. So I tend to brake just before this. It feels like I'm much closer to this when I hit the brakes, honestly, but obviously I'm about a car length in front. It's going to be a pretty aggressive brake real quick to slow the car. And then I'm going to bleed off of it, and I'm going to turn in. Frankly, I'm going to turn in early for this corner because I'm trying to get and take advantage of all the camber that is around this corner. I also don't want to travel very far. So you can actually see on the track coloring, there's a little bit of a darker line, and that's the racing line, frankly. They modeled it into the texture of the track here. So this dark color is the racing line, as you can see. That's where everybody's driving. So we're going to take something very similar. So we're going to come on down, get down to the curbing relatively quickly, and then there's a lot of coasting through this corner. If we touch the accelerator, we're going to understeer too wide. If we get on the brakes, the car is going to tuck in and start touching this curb on the inside, which we don't want to do. So it's just a lot of, we set the speed, turn in, frankly, too fast for the corner. But because of the camber that we are getting, and because we're scrubbing speed with the front tires, it all ends up working out. So you can see here, I'm not touching anything. Maybe a little bit of brake if I start to run a little bit wide, as you saw there. And then once we start coming out of the corner, we're looking, our vision is through the corner, so we're looking as far through the corner as we can. But as we start to see the end of the corner, so we start to see this candy stripe curbing on the outside and such, when we feel like we're about halfway through the corner, we'll start picking up the throttle. Basically, the nose of the car will take a little bit of a set, and it'll start going in tighter as the speed starts to scrub off. And as soon as that kind of starts to happen, now we can start feeding on the throttle to counteract that tighter line that the car is now starting to take. Because as I said before, when you start feeding on the throttle in this corner, the front end of the car is going to start understeering out, and the car is going to start going wider. And we use that to our advantage because we're going to start coming out of the corner. So we're going to use that to turn the car, not the steering wheel.
Second gear?
This is second gear, yes. This is second gear through here. Okay, perfect. So yeah, second gear through here. Coast, start feeding on throttle. You don't want to go any further than this on the way out. Going any further than this on the way out, you're probably going to get a 1x. Also, if you've gone too far out, you'll notice that there's a big crown right here. So the car will actually take this big bump because the track falls away on the outside here. So the track is still cambered a little bit to the left right here. And as soon as we cross over, or frankly get any of our tires up on this curbing, the car starts to flatten out. And if we go any further, it'll actually start to go the other way. So we don't want to go too far out on this one. We want to keep it nice and tidy. I wouldn't go any further than the right two wheels just slightly over the curbing. And frankly, I think this is still a little bit too much, because every time I go out here and I touch this green paint, it's very difficult to get under full throttle to get down to this next apex for this little S section. So don't go any further than this. The S section is going to be flat out. So we're going to do an apex, and then this is the most technical part of this track. And I have a feeling a lot of people are probably struggling with it and maintaining speed coming through these last 1, 2, 3, 4 corners. So let's try to break it down as best as we can. The first 2 corners of the S are really not difficult because they're flat and you need to take them flat. So from here, traditional apex, we're going to try to pinch the corner off a little bit to try to set up for the right-hander. Look, we've got a nice little orange curbing, like all the good orange curbings that we have around this track. So we want to try to apex the second one right around this orange curbing area, as you can see here. I tend to displace it just a touch to try to set up the right-hander coming through here, because the whole goal of this entry into these final two corners is to set up for the final two corners. So what we're doing is we're trying to get the car out here over to the left as best as we can, knowing that, one, we have to brake when we turn, we have to somehow slow down the car, but we're also trying to set up the corner. And so there's no way we can realistically get the car to a perfect position out here on the outside of this turn entry, because it's very difficult to do. So what we're doing is we're trying just to set the car up for the best chance of success. So we're touching the brake after we pass that apex point on the right side. And then we're letting the car kind of end up wherever it ends up to take the first right-hander here. And what I mean by that is, if you can't get all the way over here to the curbing, that's okay. It's really, the first part of this corner is not the important part. It's the second part that is the one that you want to nail. So if you've got to sacrifice this first one, no big deal. We also can't get on the brakes very hard here. So we're going pretty quick at this point. We're going almost 110 miles an hour when we hit the brakes. So the track is falling away from us. We're having to turn the car to the right, and we're having to brake at the same time. All three things, cars don't like to do multiple things at once, let alone three things. So we need to be very careful with our braking here. And you can see I'm only braking about 40%. And that's just to scrub speed and get the front end to set and to get the weight on the front tire so we can get a good turn in. When we get over to this point, somewhere about parallel with the candy stripe curbing, my vision here is not looking anywhere over here for a brake mark or anything like that, or turn in point. I'm looking over here through the corner to see where I want the car to go. And I see that I want the car to be displaced off this first curbing a little bit, because I want to be at the track out point on the left side of the track to set up for the final corner. So a little bit of braking. I'm going to do a little bit of coasting through this first section, displace this apex. I mean, I could be up on this curb, but it doesn't do me any good. The whole point is to try to get the car in a position for this middle section right here, somewhere over here on the left side. Add a little bit of throttle coming out, but not a lot. And if you do it right, you'll end up with your left side tires hugging this, oddly enough, orange curbing that we always talk about, to set up for the final right-hander. You can get up and you can actually cross this curbing a little bit. The fast times in qualifying, we'll actually probably see drivers getting over this curbing just to open this corner up a little more. But the problem is if you get over it, one, when you get to the curbing and you go over it, you get a significant bump. And two, the 1X is pretty quick once you go over the curbing. You can go over it a little bit, but going over it much more than a wheel width will get you that 1X. So I tend not to flirt with it. I tend to just use it as kind of a bumper if I don't want to go any further than this. And the idea here is almost like when you turn in for the first one, you're setting your hands for a double apex right-hander. At the beginning, you actually open your hands a little bit because it's not a perfect little double apex right-hander, but it's very much like that. So it's turn in, open our hands a little bit, and then turn in again to that same kind of that angle that we had for the first one. The second right-hander, we have to come out of the throttle. I tend not to brake through it. I tend to just come out of the throttle a little bit, much like that fast right-hander coming onto that back straight. So I lift on the way in just to get the nose to tuck in, and then slowly start feeding on the throttle. If I jump on it too quickly, the car is going to understeer. So it's a slow feed maintenance throttle until we get down to the apex point. There's lots of lines through this last corner. You can stay on the track and not touch the curbing. It's nice and smooth if you do that. You can jump on this green painted surface and try to use 100% of this curbing, but the car is going to bounce around when you do that, and it tends to unsettle the car coming out of the corner. So you may have to wait for the car to settle before you can go full throttle on the way through. Lots of lines through here. This particular one, I got up on the curbing. You see I'm not full throttle. I'm kind of manipulating my throttle pedal. And if we do it right, we'll end up much like that other corner where we went all the way over the curbings with the gravel. End up somewhere out here, getting a good run coming out of that corner, heading down the home straight to start finish.
Do you mind going through the gears in the last three corners?
Absolutely. So let's see here.
You're in second there, I think.
Yeah, well, so I'll be in third right here. So I'll be in third through here. I'll probably jump up to fourth, I'm guessing. No. So I'm in third through here. So let me just make sure. Cockpit. Yeah, third. So I don't go up to fourth. So second coming out of this corner. I'll grab third right around here. You can see the exhaust pop. So I'm in third at this point. Brake right here. I'll grab second right there. I grab second on my way in. So I'm in second now. I'm accelerating through. I'm still in second. Lift in second. Back on the throttle in second. And then I grab third right there where the exhaust popped again.
Right, thanks.
So I'm taking both in second. You can take this last one in third for the what I call redneck traction control, because you don't have as much torque going through the tires. It's useful if you start finding yourself really spinning up these rear tires and really sliding through this last corner. So when I was talking at the beginning of the session about overdriving the car and that this car really invites overdriving, or this track combo really invites overdriving, this is one of those spots where if you get up on this curbing and you're kind of a bit of an ape and you just like, I'm just going to slam the throttle and go, it's very easy for the rear end of this car to step out right here and you just do this power slide through this final corner. Looks spectacular. People like to see it, but it's incredibly slow and it's just destroying your rear tires. So we want to try to keep the car nice and tidy through here. If that means delaying our throttle, so be it. But if you go up to that third gear, there's less likely that you're going to put too much torque through the rear tires to overcome them on the way through. So you can grab third halfway through the two right-handers to try to make this right-hander a little bit more tolerable under full power. And there we go. We come out and we're in good shape for starting our next lap. Now, I wanted to show, I think it may be this lap. No, that's not as good. Maybe the 40. No, not the 40. Maybe this one. I felt like I had better. Okay. Remember when I talked about turn 1 and not hitting the sausage? So I had a better run through turn 1 on this particular lap, even though I messed up somewhere else on the track. But you can see where I'm putting the car right there. And you can also see how cleanly the car does not bump. It is perfectly smooth like this. See? And I can just be 100% full throttle and ride it through. I got a little bit of oversteer on the exit, but I was flying through that particular corner on that particular time. My min speed on this particular one was 107, 106. 106 as opposed to, I think it was like 103 when I first commented on that. So 3 miles an hour difference at apex, and that's because I didn't clip this curbing because I had all 4 wheels on the tarmac basically. So do your best not to clip this curbing if it's at all possible. A little bit of nibble is okay, but just understand that the more you nibble it, the more you're risking hammering it, and if you hammer it, you can damage your car as well. So let me play the lap. I'll actually just play this lap. Hopefully I didn't do anything too crazy on it. So you guys can see it. And I'll go to cockpit view so you can see what it looks like. So coming into turn 1, brake at about the start of the candy stripe. 4th gear, ride it out, open our hands. We're going to brake just before the service road. Down to 1st gear, apex at the sausage curbing. Right there. Back on throttle, opening our hands as we're accelerating so we have traction. Using all the curbing on the exit. Preparing for the hairpin, which we're going to brake right at the beginning of the curbing. We go all the way down to 1st gear. We're going to do a little bit of a late turn in. Get the car totally rotated. And then back acceleration coming out. Flat out through the right-hand kink. Move the car over to the right as soon as we're through with it. Go down to 2nd gear to take the left-hander. Turn in after the 50 board. Apex at the sausage. Off the brake on the accelerator. Get the car to the left curbing. Off the throttle. Back on the throttle. Brake just after the concrete wall. Turn in. Try to get to the grass. Never can ever do it, but we try. Let the car run all the way out. Brake before the seam. Turn in early. Coast around the corner. Car tucks in, back on second gear. Up to third gear through the S's, brake while turning. Manage the traction as best we can, get the car all the way to the outside. Turned in. I shifted to third there, if you can see, and even then I started fighting the exit. So actually that's a really good demonstration of how not to do it. So coming through here, I grabbed third early, so I'm in third gear here. I just shifted up to it. But this is what I mean. I've done about 5 laps on my tires. My tires are hot, and they're starting to probably just show a little bit of wear. I get up all the way up on this curbing, so the car is bouncing around. It's going to really bounce right here when I come over the curb again, which means I do not have a whole lot of traction. I've just got 2 tires touching the ground, and I've got a lot of throttle. And watch, as I'm coming through after that bounce, I hammer the throttle thinking I'm good, but I'm not. And what happens as a result? Here's the slide. You can see me leaving snail marks on the tarmac here. I am sliding through this corner. This is not fast. So if I do that, let's see, I'm about what? By the time I stop the slide and get to the first part of this curbing, let's just give me the benefit of the doubt. 93 miles an hour. If I go back to my fast lap and back it up to there and we go to the exact same point. Sorry. I'm 95 miles an hour and I'm still not as far. So I'm 3 miles an hour faster, under control, and continuing to accelerate at this point, where the other one, I'm just now gaining control of the car. So you can see how having your car in a really good scenario through here and balanced and planted before you get on the throttle and not sliding, how you can pick up speed as a result by not overdriving the car. So, any questions about the lap? And then I'll talk about passing points. Anything? You guys are experts? Good. Maybe you guys could teach me. Hockenheim is tough. Like I said, it's like Coda. It's the German Coda, frankly. Don't get discouraged because this is not a common track for us. Turn laps, do what you can. Do effective practice. Don't just mindly turn laps. Have a goal when you go into practice. And you'll find success here. It's a lot of fun with this combo, in my opinion. GT3s in Hockenheim it's just fantastic. This track was built for these cars, frankly. So the racing can be very good. But like Coda, it encourages a lot of side-by-side racing with a lot of switchbacks. And you need to make sure you give other people room. And that when you do race somebody hard, you're making a conscious decision to potentially make a pass. And you got to think about not only making a pass on the car in front of you, but you also have to think about your position from a macro standpoint on the race. And that will kind of segue into the second part of this classroom that if you want to attend. I'm going to talk about the sports psychology of racing and kind of what you need to be thinking mentally during a race and how to think through a race rather than just go drive a race, because it's very different. A quick note on passing opportunities on this track, because it's always usually pretty interesting for people to know where you should or shouldn't pass. Shouldn't pass in turn 1. I mean, you're going to lose, even if you're able to do it successfully. You're going to lose so much time down the next straight. It's going to be hilarious. So I would, no matter where you're at, if you can't get by somebody safely in this little run up, tuck in behind and follow them through. Unfortunately, not everybody that's racing is listening to me say this right now. So there's going to be people that do stick their nose into turn 1. If you're on the outside and somebody does stick their nose, I would say just lift, let them have it so they can get a decent run. You focus on tucking in behind them and getting a good run coming out, because you may be able to repass them on the straightaway after. Don't take it too wide, because if they overcook it, they're just going to run into the side of you and either run you off the road or wreck you. So don't pass into turn 1. Don't go side by side into turn 1. Turn 2 is a great opportunity to pass. You get a really good run on somebody through turn 1. You can get up alongside them very easily, and you can outbrake them and take away the apex. It's such a slow apex point that there's not a whole lot of momentum to be gained through here. So even if you take this corner on the inside and make a good pass, a clean pass, and overslow the car on apex, you're not losing a whole lot of time down the straight, because again, we're going 50 miles an hour at the apex point anyway. So turn 2 is a really good spot to pass. Obviously, the hairpin down here, another great opportunity to pass. We got a big long straightaway that you can get a really good draft on somebody all the way down and get alongside somebody to try to outbrake somebody coming into the hairpin. If you are attacking, make sure that you don't overshoot the corner. It's very easy to put your brake marker on the other car and you're waiting for them to brake and then you brake. If you do that, you will go through the brake zone. So brake at your normal point, have an emergency brake spot where your point of no return, so to speak. And no matter what the other car does, you have to brake at that point, because if they're waiting on you to brake before they brake because they're trying to outbrake you and you're waiting on them, neither of you are going to brake and you're both going to sail through the corner. So if you have that point of no return where you know 100% emergency stop, you can't slow the car down in time for the corner, and they brake later than that, they're going to go through the corner. Just physics in general. You're driving the same car. So keep that in mind. If you're the defender and somebody decides to try to outbrake you going into here and you've hit that point of no return, let them go. They'll sail through it, and then you'll just over under them on the way through and pass them on the way through. They'll go sailing through. You'll come in down below them and you'll pass them. But this is a really good passing opportunity here. This left-hand turn, I would strongly discourage trying to pass through here, because if you totally sacrifice this turn too much, it can really hamper your run coming through the little kink that's up ahead. It is a potential opportunity. It's not the primary choice. This kink is not a passing zone. Again, like turn 1, the car is completely on edge. We're using 100% of the track. I really would not try to take this too wide, because even if you do successfully, you are going to lose at least half a second to the field doing it. Same thing here. Again, car is completely on edge. If you go too wide through here, both cars are going to lose at least half a second to the field, maybe even a full second. Not to mention the road really narrows up on track out, and it's very difficult to maintain too wide all the way through this corner, and it usually ends in contact between the two cars. This is a decent passing opportunity if you can get alongside your opponent for the brake zone. So you get a really good run in the previous fast right-hander, get alongside them, you just run a little bit wide and then hit the brakes slightly later than them, and you can take away the inside, get the car down on the inside and just hug the inside. You're going to have this corner over your opponent very easily. So this is actually a really good opportunity to pass. And then we get to the final right to double right-hander. The racer in me says that this is a cheeky little place to get a pass in. The instructor in me says be very careful. It's a really, really good opportunity to catch somebody napping, frankly, because everybody's doing the exact same thing. They're trying to get the car over. Their brain is completely consumed with trying to get to the right point to turn in to make this corner quick. So it's a very high demand corner on a driver's mental capacity. When that happens, drivers can take advantage of that by potentially sending it up the inside when somebody's not expecting it. So they're driving their line thinking, okay, I'm just going to do what everybody does and motor on around here. I'm focusing on my markers or whatever. There is an opportunity when you come out of here just to take a tighter line, because you can. The car is not on edge right here, and send it up in this area and brake later and overslow the car for the first one, but they can't drive through you. And you can get past a car before the turn-in point here through braking. It's not something I would do on the regular because it is a relatively high-risk move. Maybe if it's like the last couple laps and you've got a pace advantage over the person you're following, but it is possible to do that. This last corner is not a passing zone. The cars should be pretty much equal, unless somebody really made a mistake in the first one and you're able to somehow get on the inside of them here for the second one. Other than that, it's kind of just follow in line and take the line as best as possible. So yeah, there's your brake markers, or your passing areas. Any questions, comments, concerns? Yes, no, maybe so. Okay. All right, well, I wish you guys the best of luck out there for the next couple of weeks. If you have any questions whatsoever, feel free to reach out to myself in Discord. If you ever wanted me to take a look at your laps or your data or whatever, I'm happy to help out. As is most of, or pretty much anybody that has a MOG tag in Discord, we will also be happy to, they'll be happy to help out where we can. So please use us. Please, we like trying to make students and make people go faster. So use us and abuse us and take advantage of that, please. That's why we're here. But yeah, with that said, if you want to go ahead and go jump into practices, the servers should be opening for different EDEs doing different things. If you want to hear about the mental aspects of racing, I'll probably try to keep that to about 30 minutes or so. I hope that's a little bit more interactive where people ask more questions. But we can chat about that and do that. But I'm going to take a quick, maybe couple minute break before I launch into that and allow people to stick around if you want. So with that, I'll leave it at that, and good luck this weekend. And for those of you sticking around, I'll talk to you in a couple of minutes.